Let me tell you something. I have sat on a bench for decades. I have looked into the eyes of liars, cheats, fraudsters, deadbeats, and criminals of every variety. I have seen things in that courtroom that would make your hair stand on end. But every once in a while, a case comes across that stops even me cold. Not because of the violence, not because of the planning, but because of the face sitting across from justice, young, calm, smirking. She was 14 years old, 14, and she sat in that courtroom with her legs swinging under the defense table like she was waiting for the school bus. The prosecutor was describing the deaths of her parents, and this girl had a smirk on her face. Not confusion, not grief, not even the fake performance of remorse that most defendants at least bother to put on for the jury. A smirk, like she found the whole thing mildly amusing. I have seen a lot of defendants in my time. I know the difference between someone who is scared and hiding it, someone who is guilty and performing innocence, and someone who simply does not care. This girl did not care. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the most dangerous kind of person I have ever encountered in a courtroom. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story does not start in a courtroom. It starts in a perfectly ordinary suburban home, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning, in a neighborhood where people waved to each other from their porches and children played on front lawns, the kind of neighborhood where you would never in a million years expect what was about to happen. The father's name was Michael. He was the kind of man who set his alarm for 5 a.m, not because anyone made him, but because he believed in getting ahead of the day. He showered in the dark so he would not wake his wife. He brewed the coffee. He worked as an accountant downtown, precise and reliable. He checked his children's homework. He color-coded the family calendar. He believed that structure was love, that clear rules and consistent expectations were how you showed a child you cared about their future. Was he a pushover? Absolutely not. Was he a monster? Not by any stretch of the imagination. The mother's name was Sarah. She volunteered 2 afternoons a week at the local elementary school, reading to first graders, helping them sound out difficult words. On the mornings, she was not volunteering. She put handwritten notes in her children's lunch boxes, not just any notes, specifically composed messages that acknowledged something each child had done well the previous day or encouraged them about something coming up. She kept a family calendar. She baked cookies on rainy days. She organized movie nights when the weather turned cold. Sunday dinners were sacred in that house. Birthday traditions were never skipped. To anyone looking in from the outside, and plenty of people did look in, Michael and Sarah Thompson had built something most people spend their entire lives searching for: a genuinely safe home, a real family, 2 people who loved their children and worked every single day to show it. Now, their younger son was 11 years old at the time these events unfolded. Quiet kid, sensitive. He had inherited his father's attention to detail and his mother's emotional awareness. He noticed things other kids did not bother to notice. He made his father tea when he came home tired. He heard his mother crying softly at the kitchen sink and felt it as his own pain. He was not the kid who dominated a room. He was the kid who watched the room carefully and understood it better than anyone else in it. And what happened to that child as a result of his sister's actions is something I will come back to, because it is one of the most devastating parts of this entire story. Then there was the daughter. And here is where I need you to pay close attention, because this is not a story about a confused teenager who made a terrible, impulsive mistake. I want to be very clear about that right from the start. This is a story about a young person who felt that her parents' rules and expectations were unacceptable constraints on her freedom, and who made a cold, calculated, methodical decision to eliminate those constraints permanently, not by running away, not by acting out, not by the typical rebellions of adolescence, by poisoning them. From early childhood, she had demanded to be the center of everything. As she moved into her teenage years, that need transformed into resentment. The rules her parents imposed felt like oppression. The structure they maintained felt like control. When she was denied something, she did not process it as a boundary. She processed it as a personal attack. She kept a journal hidden under her mattress filled with extensive writing about how unfair her life was, how her parents did not understand her, how she would be happier without them. The tension between her and her parents had been building for years, so gradually that no single moment could be identified as the breaking point. It was the slow accumulation of small conflicts, curfews challenged, phone usage monitored, attitudes punished, freedoms restricted. And here is where I will tell you something I have learned from a lifetime in courtrooms. There is a version of that story that sounds sympathetic. Teenager resents strict parents. Teenager feels misunderstood. Teenager acts out. That is a story as old as time, and most of the time it ends with the teenager growing up and realizing their parents were trying to protect them, but that is not what happened here. What happened here was that a young person made a deliberate choice to research, acquire, plan, and execute the murders of the two people who had raised her, and then sat in a courtroom and smirked about it. Let me tell you about the morning everything changed. She was already awake before anyone else in the house. It was early, still dark outside, the house quiet. While her parents slept and her younger brother slept, she moved through the kitchen with what investigators would later describe as surgical precision. She was wearing latex gloves, she had a small container, and she added a white powder to the orange juice pitcher that her mother had freshly squeezed the night before and stored in the refrigerator. By the time Sarah came downstairs to make breakfast, toast, scrambled eggs, that orange juice, the poison was already waiting. When her parents came to the table, she sat down with them. She smiled, she made conversation, she asked about their day, and she watched them eat. She herself had a glass of water, just water. She had already decided she would not be eating that morning. By 7:15, her father was touching his tongue to the roof of his mouth with a look of confusion. "Does this taste odd to you?" he asked Sarah. She paused, nodded. There was a metallic quality to the juice, a faint chemical undertone to the toast. Their daughter suggested maybe the orange juice had gone bad. Maybe they had used old eggs. She offered reasonable explanations while knowing exactly what they had consumed. By 8:30, Michael was nauseous. By 9 o'clock, both parents were sick. Their daughter emerged from her room periodically to ask if they needed anything. She brought them water. She made sympathetic sounds about food poisoning. She suggested they rest. She performed the role of a concerned teenager with what witnesses would later describe as disturbing precision. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, she called 911, steady voice, clear address, exactly the right amount of worry in her tone. Not too much, not too little, just enough. The ambulance came. The neighbors watched from their porches. Two parents were loaded onto stretchers while their daughter stood in the driveway with her younger brother, watching. During the drive to their grandmother's house, she asked worried questions. She displayed every behavior a frightened child would display. She was performing a role, and she was performing it flawlessly. Michael died first. His organs failed one system at a time. Sarah followed by mourning. And in that hospital, while machines beeped and monitors flickered and an 11-year-old boy learned that both his parents were gone, their daughter sat in the waiting room and waited to be brought in for questioning. Now let me tell you what the medical examiner found. Dr. Patricia Hernandez had worked in that office for 23 years. She had performed thousands of autopsies. She had seen death in every form imaginable. But when Michael and Sarah Thompson arrived on her table, something shifted. These bodies showed no signs of violence, no wounds, no defensive injuries, just the quiet, systematic failure of every organ system, one after another, as a substance that had no business being inside a human body moved through them and destroyed everything in its path. The toxicology results came back with devastating clarity. Both victims had consumed a poison powerful enough to be lethal in relatively small doses, yet slow-acting enough to initially appear as a mild illness. The concentrations found in their blood could only have resulted from deliberate administration. This was not accidental contamination. This was not spoiled food. This was murder, intentional, calculated, carried out by someone who had known exactly what they were doing. The police investigation shifted immediately. Detectives were assigned. The house was sealed as a crime scene. Every surface was photographed. Every item in the kitchen was cataloged and tested. The orange juice pitcher was analyzed. The plates were swabbed. The kitchen garbage was sifted through piece by piece. What they found was methodical evidence of planning. No forced entry. No signs of robbery, no struggle. The doors had been locked from the inside. The windows were secure. Nothing had been disturbed except for the lives of two people who had been